Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show. It's the place for politics. President Donald Trump has had a quite extraordinary week, raising over $400 million in small and medium-sized donations for his campaign. Meanwhile, the Georgia Appeals Court has put a stay on the case against President Donald Trump that was brought by the Fulton County prosecutor. There's also promising development in Florida, where Judge Eileen Cannon has broadened and extended a hearing into a motion by President Trump's lawyers, which questions whether the very appointment of special counsel Jack Smith is legal and therefore legitimate. And of course, if Smith were to be ruled to have been illegally appointed, obviously the charges he files would be voided. But the question on, I think, most Americans' minds, certainly most Trump supporters' minds, is what will happen when the president goes for sentencing on July 12th in this travesty of a case in Manhattan, in which to this day we still cannot determine the underlying federal crime which made the financial transactions that Donald Trump was accused of making a felony, a criminal matter. Joining me now to address these issues is Will Scharf. Will Scharf is one of President Trump's attorneys. I've had him as a guest previously. I am very comforted by the fact that Will is among those lawyers working on President Trump's appeal. Will Scharf, thank you so much for joining us on The Roger Stone Show.
Always great to be with you, Roger. Really appreciate you having me on.
Very, very honored to have you on. You know, Will, one of the things I learned this past week is you can go to 4 of the smartest lawyers you know. Lawyers who understand that it's not just what's in the pleadings and what happens in the courtroom that's important. Yes, those things are incredibly important, but it's also what happens outside the courtroom, in the sense that public events and the media coverage of public events still affects what goes on in court. I didn't really realize that in the Alvin Bragg trial in New York, or that the jurors were never sequestered. So on the weekends, the weekend before the president, I think, was unjustly convicted, we have to assume, despite an order by the judge, don't watch any television, that all of that news coverage impacts a judicial situation like this. I guess what most people want to know is, what is the path forward? Having been subjected to a Soviet-style show trial myself in Washington, D.C., a trial in which the Constitution, the rules, the facts, the evidence, none of those things mattered. A trial in which, just as President Trump was not allowed to call the former chairman, vice chairman, and general counsel of the Federal Election Commission as a witness, he presumably would have testified that there was no campaign finance crime here. I was not allowed to call Bill Binney, the former CIA counterterrorism expert, counterterrorism tech expert, who could have testified and proved with forensic evidence that there never was any online hack of the Democratic National Committee, not by Russian intelligence or anyone else. But of course, I wasn't allowed to call him as a witness because he would have undermined the entire premise of the relatively flimsy case against me. President Trump was subjected to the same kind of limitations. So anyway, the real question, I guess my first question for you, Will, stop filibustering, is what happens next? What must the president's attorneys do next?
Yeah, well, I think you're framing it exactly correctly, Roger. This was a show trial in the finest sense of the word. The case itself, it's a complicated legal theory that should have never seen the inside of a courtroom. The allegations in question date back almost a decade, over half a decade. This case could have been brought at any time. It wasn't brought because of how flimsy a case it was. And then suddenly President Trump decides to run for president again. They rush this thing into a grand jury. They rush it into court at the height of a presidential election. There was a media circus from day one outside the court in Manhattan. I know you saw a lot of that. And this was a case that was designed to do one thing and one thing only, which was give the Biden campaign a talking point. There was no legal reason to bring this case. President Trump did nothing wrong. I think we actually proved that over the course of trial. But unfortunately, you had a judge who I believe was irretrievably biased, who should have recused off of this case, and who shaped the proceedings in such a way that we ended up where we are now. We're going to vigorously challenge almost every aspect of this trial on appeal. That's already in the works now. We're ready to roll there. We're considering other options in terms of other legal attacks on this judgment. We are going to make sure that in the end, President Trump's rights are vindicated, because a terrible injustice has been done in this New York court, and it should not stand for the good of President Trump, but also for the good of the Republic. You can't have this sort of process play out. You can't have our system of elections subverted with a campaign of lawfare like we've seen. I think that if we don't win, we're entering Banana Republic territory if we're not already there, that it could truly be the end of the American Republic. So we're fighting on all fronts. We're excited to get this case into the next court. We're excited to take it all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if we need to. And that's what we're going to do if that's what it takes to vindicate President Trump's rights here.
Now, as you know, I'm not an attorney. Are you able to file an appeal prior to sentencing?
We can't file a direct appeal of the verdict prior to sentencing because we don't have a judgment yet. There's no technical judgment in the case. There are potentially other options for what would be called a collateral attack on the judgment. A lot of very smart lawyers are looking at that now. If we have the ability to do that, if we have the ability to prevent sentencing from happening, we'd obviously want to do that. But certainly as of July 11th, the ballpark's open, and we have a lot of options to make sure that this injustice doesn't stand.
At least one very smart lawyer told me that one option was for the president's lawyers to ask for an expedited an expedited sentencing, and if the judge were to deny that, looking at the election, of course, that won't give you leave to go to the Supreme Court on a due process argument. Your thoughts about that theory?
I need to be a little careful about what I say, but we're considering all options, and it is I'd say a strong priority of ours to expedite these proceedings every step of the way, to expedite our appeals at every step of the way, to make sure that we get in front of a fair court as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I understand you are limited in what you can say, and I very much appreciate your joining us for the show today on that condition. Will, you're running yourself as a candidate for Attorney General of your home state of Missouri. People don't know how all-consuming a campaign for public office is, any public office. So between your defense of the president, your involvement with the president's legal team, which gives me great comfort because I have a extraordinarily high regard for your capabilities, and your own campaign for Attorney General, when do you sleep?
I don't sleep, Roger. I haven't slept in a very long time. It's the voters of Missouri, the Republican voters of Missouri, I think appreciate the work that I'm doing for the president. And I've just been heartened by the support that I've gotten here in Missouri for the work that the team and I are doing for the president. And really, just as I've gotten around the state, we hear the same thing everywhere, which is deep dissatisfaction with the political establishment, both Democrats and Republicans. People understand that things, in our country, in our state, aren't working well. And I think they want conservative outsiders to really shake things up. And that's core to our message. That's the message that we're carrying to the people of Missouri. But obviously, President Trump's cases are an absolute priority. We're making sure that we get done everything we need to get done for him. And we're going to keep fighting for him because he's always fought for us.
I think it is extraordinarily selfless on your part because I understand, that there have to be occasions where you put aside campaign activities to put a higher priority on defending the greatest president since Abraham Lincoln. So I commend you for that. Your reaction to the announcement that the appeals court in Georgia has stayed trial in that state, evidently now going to re-examine the epic corruption of Fulton County prosecutor Fani Willis. Your reaction?
Yeah, it's really important to remember New York has gotten so much media attention. We need to think about what the larger scheme was here. What the Democrats, what Joe Biden and his allies wanted was for President Trump to be stuck in trial after trial after trial, basically this entire year. Fortunately, because of the work that our team's been able to do, these other prosecutions, the two federal cases in D.C. and Florida, the state case brought by Fani Willis in Georgia, it's highly unlikely, almost impossible that any of those cases are going to proceed to trial before the election, which means that President Trump will have a relatively clear field to go out and do what he does best, which is carry his message to the American people. In this Georgia case, epic corruption by Fani Willis. That's another case that should have never been brought. And she obviously hired her secret lover, this guy Nathan Wade, to prosecute that case, creating all kinds of conflicts of interest. She should have been disqualified by the trial court, but we were happy that that issue was certified to the Court of Appeals. And now it looks like the Georgia appellate courts are going to step in and do the right thing. She absolutely should be disqualified, but at the very least, the timeline of that case now has been elongated significantly, such that it's essentially impossible that it could proceed to trial before the election, which in and of itself is a great win. But I think Fani Willis herself is now in more legal jeopardy than any of the defendants in that Georgia case, just because of all of the corruption, the conflicts of interest, just because of the way she decided to handle that prosecution, which really goes to show, I believe, that this whole leftist campaign of lawfare, it's failing. The American people see through it. Courts are seeing through it. Folks understand what's going on here, and we just need to keep on fighting and keep on winning.
We've talked about this before. As you know, during my own trial, one of the witnesses that the government wanted to call, a young guy who worked for me named Andrew Miller, did not want to testify. Now, the truth is there was nothing that he could possibly have said that was detrimental to me. Why the prosecutors wanted to call him was a mystery, but it really became a fight over, how big their authority was, not the facts. His attorney, extraordinarily able, Paul Kamenar, raised the question about whether Robert Mueller's appointment was legal, because Robert Mueller was not a sitting U.S. attorney, and there was and is no special counsel law in place. There's an amazing exchange I'm going to play for you between Congressman Thomas Massie and Attorney General Merrick Garland. Let's listen.
Was Jack Smith nominated by President Biden or confirmed by the U.S. Senate?
Look, you're asking me about a case again. Motions filed.
This is a simple question.
No, I'm not.
Was Jack Smith nominated by President Biden?
No, he was not.
Was he confirmed by the Senate?
No, he was not.
When was the special counsel statute passed?
There is no special counsel statute. There was an independent counsel statute that was expired.
So it expired. So what gives you the authority to appoint a special counsel? You've created an office in the U.S. government that does not exist without authorization from Congress.
An extraordinarily powerful exchange there. That was Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky and U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland. In the D.C. case, Mr. Miller took his case to the trial judge, who, of course, denied it. Then it went to the appeals court. They also denied it. And then he ran out of time. Certainly could have taken his case to the U.S. Supreme Court, but lo and behold, once they could call him as a witness, they didn't. The issues here are exactly the same. Former Attorney General Ed Meese and two highly respected law school professors, neither one of whom, by the way, is a Trump supporter or a Republican, have raised this exact question regarding Jack Smith. Now, I was a little surprised when Clarence Thomas, during the immunity question hearing, asked one of your associates whether we were raising that issue, but then raising it in the D.C. system on appeal would make no sense at all. The D.C. courts having ruled wrongly, incorrectly on this issue previously, but the president's legal team preserved this issue in Florida, and now Judge Eileen Cannon, has agreed to hear it. The folks at MSNBC are going literally out of their minds. Your feelings about this argument and the potential here?
Yeah, I think it's very clear that Jack Smith's appointment is unconstitutional. As you said, we had bad case law on that in the D.C. circuit, so we chose to raise that first in the Florida case. That's now set for a hearing. Judge Cannon seems to be taking these issues very seriously. She actually granted General Meese and his team the opportunity to be heard at the hearing there as amici, which is not all that common. So she seems to be taking that quite seriously. If she were to rule that Jack Smith was unconstitutionally appointed, that would lead to a dismissal, would likely lead to a dismissal of the Florida prosecution, and could easily lead to the dismissal of the D.C. prosecution as well. We would expect that to be a decision there to be appealed by the Department of Justice, by Jack Smith's team, and that could easily end up before the Supreme Court quite quickly. But we feel very good about our arguments there. As you indicated, deep constitutional problems with the idea that you can just appoint a guy without Senate confirmation, without going through the usual constitutional process, and that guy can then bring indictments in his own name, can do all the things that a U.S. attorney would ordinarily do. Typically, when you have special counsels appointed, they are already Senate confirmed. They are U.S. attorneys or other Senate confirmed officials. With Jack Smith, that's obviously not the case. So we're in constitutionally dubious territory with respect to the initiation of these prosecutions, much less the way that they've been conducted. We feel good about our chances in Florida. I think that, it's clear that Judge Cannon is at the very least taking these arguments seriously and wants to be properly apprised of their merits by all parties.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC Radio, and we are talking to one of President Donald Trump's defense attorneys, Will Scharf. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're going to continue with Attorney Scharf after this brief commercial message, so don't go away.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. Yes, this is the Roger Stone Show, and I'm here with Will Scharf, one of President Donald Trump's most able attorneys, a man who's deeply involved in his appeal and his legal maneuvering in the wake of this horrific conviction in New York City, where I saw that Jonathan Turley, who I have a huge high regard for, say yesterday that a week after the trial, he still doesn't know what the underlying crime that Donald Trump was convicted of is. This one from column B, one from column A, random choice, was something that's never been seen before. So in other words, to explain this as best as I can, for the financial transactions in question to be to rise to the level of a felony, a criminal offense, they have to either be connected to or be part of covering up some larger underlying federal crime, which the prosecutors never actually established. Will, is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The theory of the case shifted wildly over the course of the trial. I don't think we were on proper notice in terms of President Trump's due process rights until closing arguments. Trials are not supposed to be trial by surprise. You're supposed to lay out your cards and everyone's supposed to be on the same page in terms of what's at issue. And that really wasn't the case here. So there are a lot of constitutional issues with the way this trial was conducted. That lack of notice is a very real one. This is sort of a Frankenstein case cobbled together from different parts and different theories. And it's one of a kind. I've never seen anything like it in my career in practicing law, and I know that experts like Jonathan Turley have said the same.
So one of the things I told you I wanted to focus on is Donald Trump, the man. I've known him for 45 years, and I may be among the first people in the country to urge him to run for president as early as 1988. I saw fairly early that he had the size, I don't mean the physical size, but the stature, the courage, the strength, the stamina to be a great president, not just a great presidential candidate, but a great president. I also understood his non-establishment politics. He had, as a businessman, supported both Republicans and Democrats, and in almost all cases, been extraordinarily disappointed in our federal government and how they acted. He has, going all the way back to 1988, thought that our NATO allies were taking advantage of us, that we were paying for their defense, but they were never paying their fair share, never paying their bills. This is not a new issue. He's been talking about it since 1988. He hated the one-size-fits-all international trade deals in which they were great for our trading partners. They weren't so great for us, however. He's been amazingly consistent, but the question I'm asked constantly is, how does he put up with the stress of all of this? In other words, how does he stand up to it? And my answer is, he's literally the toughest man I've ever met. I worked for Richard Nixon. I worked for Senator Bob Dole. They're both great men. They're both very tough men. Donald Trump is tougher and more resilient than anybody I've ever met. I thought his interviews with Sean Hannity were some of the best I've ever seen. He was masterful. This idea that he's under pressure or hysterical, I know from my own conversations with him, just not true. Just not true. Well, in your own interactions with him, what are your observations?
Yeah, he's relentless. He has boundless energy. I honestly believe that he doesn't let any of this faze him. I think he's deeply committed to the mission of bringing back American greatness, of getting back into the White House and doing all of the important things that he has to do. This leftist campaign of lawfare would have worn down any normal politician. There's no way that anyone else could have dealt with it the way that President Trump is dealing with it. And I've just been amazed at every step of the way, as you said, just how resilient he is, and the fact that the man just doesn't stop. I mean, the fact that he can go on stage and give these 90-minute speeches night after night after night, the fact that he's out, every single day all over the country while dealing with everything that he's dealing with, and that he's able to, just keep it going. It's frankly amazing. And I think it just speaks to the kind of person he is. I think he's just a remarkable man, and it's an honor to work for him.
Well, I knew both his parents, Fred and Mary, very well. They were both vital into their 90s. Fred Trump still going to the office in his middle 90s. Donald Trump is of tough German and Scottish stock. He is, as you point out, relentless. What really aggravates me is when Joe Biden keeps saying, this is all about Trump. It's Trump's campaign is all about Trump. Well, if this were about Trump, he would retire. He could retire to the greatest life in the world. He's got the most beautiful golf courses in the country. His golf course outside of Los Angeles is breathtaking. He could spend more time with his family and his grandchildren, and instead he puts himself in the line of fire because he loves the country, because he doesn't like seeing what happened to the country. And making it worse, he realizes the difference between what great shape we were in when he left office and the condition that we're in today. So I agree with your observation. It's not about him. It's about America. A lesser man would have quit by now. But the one thing you can say about Donald J. Trump is that he will never quit. Will, let me ask you, if folks wanted to learn more about your campaign for Attorney General in Missouri, they want to give a campaign contribution, read more about you, where can they go?
Our website is votescharf.com, VOTESCHARF.com. And you can find me on social media, on Twitter, on Truth Social, Instagram, Facebook, just at Will Scharf. But yeah, I really appreciate it, Roger. Always great to join you, and thanks so much for having me on.
All right. Many thanks to Will Scharf, one of President Donald Trump's attorneys working on his upcoming appeal. Thanks for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show. I'm exceptionally proud to be a member of the 77 WABC radio family, and I ask you to stay tuned because my good friend Joe Piscopo will be right along with Sundays with Sinatra.